Well, it is the new year, and we've talked about the best films of the year, we've talked about the worst films of the year, but now it's time to look forward. 2026 seems to be a promising year, at least for films, and I'm very excited to see these films come out. So let's get started and talk about my top 10 most anticipated films of 2026. At number 10, we have Avengers Doomsday, directed by the Russo brothers. Honestly, had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin not have been shelved, this film would have ended up in the honorable mention. Not to say I'm not excited for this, because as of last year, the MCU has kind of been on the mend, with exciting new films like Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, and heck, even Daredevil Born Again, despite its flaws caused by insane reshoots, set up a promising second season. But what puts the cautious and cautiously optimistic for me is Robert Downey Jr. as Doomsday. For starters, Doctor Doom was not set up in the slightest in the multiverse saga. Kang is like the easiest character to ever recast, and the casting of Robert Downey Jr. and the hiring of the Russo brothers felt like they hit the panic button. But despite all that, I have hope. The MCU is slowly recovering, and maybe Doomsday and Secret Wars can bring back the MCU to its former glory. But it'll be cool to see the X-Men and probably other characters from past properties, and I'm glad that the old gang is getting back again. But what I'm really hoping for is that this film will try to be a movie and not some nostalgia bait. Avengers Doomsday is set to release in theaters on December 17. At number 9, we have Spider-Man Brand New Day, directed by Destin Daniel Cretton. Much like Doomsday, I am cautiously optimistic, but for Brand New Day, I'm more on the side of optimism. For starters, Destin Daniel Cretton is a far better director than John Watts, at least when it comes to directing action, but I think even if the film ends up being subpar, we should expect some amazing action. I'm really hoping that this film sticks to its guns and doesn't go back on the ending of No Way Home. I think where Peter is at right now in the MCU is the most interesting he's ever been, and I think Destin has a good pulse on the character of Spider-Man. I kind of wish that these MCU Spider-Man movies would forego the guest MCU appearance trope, because I just want Spider-Man to be Spider-Man. But if there were to be anyone, I think the Punisher is a great contrast to Spider-Man, and I'm excited to see him here. I'm a bit iffy on the Hulk being here, but if they bring back Savage Hulk, then that would be lit. I think that this has the potential to be great and bring back Spider-Man to his roots, and I'm excited to see what these guys are cooking. Spider-Man Brand New Day is set to release in theaters on January 31st. At number 8, we have Supergirl, directed by Greg Gillespie. Superman was a fantastic film with a lot on its shoulders, but I'd argue that Supergirl has the same, if not more weight on its shoulders, as it'll determine if the DCU has staying power or not. I've never read the comic that Supergirl is based on, but I can say that Craig Gillespie is a good director, and from what we saw of Millie Alok in Superman and in the Supergirl trailer, I think she'll be great. I also love how this film will take us to space, with it being more like a space opera than a superhero movie like Superman was. Also, Jason Momoa as Lobo is just perfect casting, and he's going to absolutely kill it. I'm just really excited to see Lobo on the big screen. He's just a very cool character. I'm also hyped to see Crypto back. He was one of the best aspects of Superman, and I'm sure he'll be just as good here. Supergirl is set to release in theaters on June 26. At number 7, we have Clayface, directed by James Watkins. I promise I'm done talking about superhero movies after this. Although the idea of a Clayface movie sounds like it'd be something that Sony would do, what makes this stand out from the Venom universe projects is the simple fact that Mike Flanagan wrote this film. Mike Flanagan is one of the best horror filmmakers working today, with amazing films and shows like Doctor Sleep and The Haunting on Hill House under his belt. And the idea that the third film in the DCU will be an R-rated horror film is really exciting, and it shows that the DCU will be very diverse in terms of tone and what type of movies they'll put out. And this isn't going to be like the New Mutants superhero horror. This is going to be a straight up horror film, and that's just so cool. Now, I'll admit I've never seen anything that James Watkins has put out, but if Flanagan's script is any good, I think we're in for a good time. Clayface is set to release in theaters on September 11th. At number 6, we have The Adventures of Cliff Booth, directed by David Fincher. The fact that this film is happening kind of blows my mind. For starters, I love David Fincher, and I think he's made some amazing stuff. But secondly, the film is a sequel to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is one of my favorite Tarantino films. And thirdly, the film was written by Tarantino himself. It's just insane to me that David Fincher is directing a script written by Quentin Tarantino. This has to be one of the most insane collaborations of all time. Not much is known about this film outside of it following Brad Pitt's character from the first film, but I think the mere fact that these two juggernaut filmmakers are working on it together is enough to be excited about. The Adventures of Cliff Booth is set to release on Netflix and in theaters sometime in 2026. At number 5, we have Evil Dead Burns, directed by Sebastian Vienick. Evil Dead is not only one of my favorite horror franchises of all time, but honestly, one of my favorite film franchises of all time, with there not being a single bad film in it. Evil Dead 2013 and Evil Dead Rise proved that you don't need Sam Raimi at the director's chair to make an Evil Dead film work. The previous 2 Evil Dead films brought the franchise back to its dark horror roots, and I'm really hoping this film does the same, but I'm also hoping that it kind of brings back the comedy elements that were kind of missing from the previous 2 films. I'm not familiar with the director's work, but I am looking forward to seeing another Evil Dead film in theaters. Evil Dead Burns is set to release in theaters on July 24th. At number 4, we have 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, directed by Nia DaCosta. Although I am kind of bummed that Danny Boyle isn't directing the sequel to 28 Years Later, I do think that with Alex Garland's script, this film can be fantastic. 28 Years Later was one of my favorite films from 2025, and I'm excited to see the story of Spike and the gang progress in this film and in the trilogy as a whole. I really loved the characters that were introduced in the previous film, and I'm interested to see how Spike does with this new cult group. The world of 28 is just so fascinating to me, and is one of the best zombie apocalypses ever in my opinion, and the evolution of the zombies is so cool, and I'm very invested in this story. 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple is set to release in theaters January 16th. At number 3, we have Dune Part 3, directed by Denis Villeneuve. Dune, to me, is the modern Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I'm excited to see how Villeneuve wraps up this epic. And the addition of Robert Pattinson to the cast is very exciting, along with the already stacked cast. This trilogy thus far has had some of the best production I've ever seen. The world of Arrakis feels so well realized, and the arc of Paul Atreides has been really cool to see unfold. Villeneuve is legit one of the best directors in the game, and his Dune trilogy so far has been absolutely extraordinary. Dune Part 3 is set to release in theaters on December 17th. At number 2, we have The Odyssey, written and directed by Christopher Nolan. Nolan is by far the most notable filmmaker in the past 30 years and has made some truly outstanding films, with Oppenheimer not only being one of his best films, but also having a massive cultural impact. And I think The Odyssey will be no different, with it again being filmed in 70mm IMAX, and like Oppenheimer, has a star-studded cast with the likes of Matt Damon, Tom Holland, Zendaya, Jon Bernthal, Robert Pattinson, Mia Goth, Anne Hathaway, Elliot Page, and Benny Safdie. I plan on seeing this in 70mm IMAX if the projector doesn't break down. I'm looking at you, Regal Opry Mills in Nashville, and I'm looking forward to seeing this on the biggest screen imaginable, the way it was intended. The ambition of this film is unlike anything I've ever heard of, and I think Nolan can pull it off. The Odyssey is set to release in theaters on July 17th. Before we get to number 1, here are some honorable mentions. Remain, written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan. The Magician's Nephew, written and directed by Greta Gerwig. Project Hail Mary, directed by Phil Lord and Chris Miller. The Bride, directed by and starring Maggie Gyllenhaal. And Send Help, directed by Sam Raimi. At number 1, we have Werewolf, directed by Robert Eggers. Robert Eggers is by far my favorite filmmaker working today, with Nosferatu being my favorite film of 2024, and The Lighthouse being one of my favorite films of all time. This man cannot help but to make peak, and Werewolf is right up his alley. Eggers is bringing back his cast from previous projects, with Willem Dafoe, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Lily Rose Depp, and Ralph Fiennes all being in this film. I'm really excited to see what this man is cooking, and after the success of Nosferatu, I think the studio will definitely give this project more money and give Eggers the freedom he needs. Werewolf is set to release in theaters on December 25th. Well, those are my most anticipated films of the year. Tell me what films you're looking forward to this year. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, and Happy New Year.
And there's not another human in view. and